Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Welcome to the Science of Hockey, where research meets action. I'm your host, the analyst. In this episode, we dive into the contentious issue of body checking in youth hockey. Does more experience with body checking actually protect players from injury? Stay tuned to find out what the data says.
All right, let's get right into it today. We're diving deep into youth hockey. And specifically, we're tackling body checking. Does all that hitting experience actually make players safer?
Well, there's this really interesting study we're going to unpack today, published pretty recently, actually, last year in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. And it really gets into this whole debate that's been going on forever in hockey.
Right. And this study focuses on those older youth players, right, like 15 to 17-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly. In Canada, which, has a massive youth hockey scene.
Oh, yeah.
Huge. Over 74,000 teenagers playing competitive hockey.
Wow.
And they've been making some changes to limit body checking, especially for the younger kids.
Yeah.
But it's still allowed in those older leagues. So that's where this study comes in. They wanted to see if all those years of experience actually translate into fewer injuries when those kids get to that 15 to 17 age group.
Makes sense. So how'd they go about figuring that out? What kind of research was it?
So they did what's called a prospective cohort study. I know it sounds kind of jargony, but basically it just means they followed a big group of players in Alberta over 3 whole seasons.
Oh, wow.
And they tracked injuries, as they happened, in real time.
Interesting.
Instead of asking players to remember stuff later.
Right. So much more reliable. So did they group those players based on how much experience they had with body checking?
Exactly. They had 2 groups. One group had 2 years or less of body checking experience, which means they were probably only exposed to it in those younger leagues.
Gotcha.
And then the other group, they had 3 years or more under their belts.
Okay. So 2 pretty distinct groups there. And then what exactly were they looking for? What kind of injuries?
They focused on 3 main outcomes, all injuries in general. Injuries that were serious enough to make a player miss more than 7 days, so pretty significant.
Okay.
And of course, concussions, always a big concern.
Absolutely. So did the study find that experience actually makes players safer?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The study actually found that the players with more body checking experience had significantly higher rates of all 3 types of injuries.
Wait, hold on. More experience, more injuries. That kind of seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does, right? You'd think that the more you do something, the better you get at it, the safer you are.
The more you body check, the better you learn how to give and receive those hits.
Right. Yeah, that's the common thinking. But the data tells a different story.
So how much higher were the injury rates? Can you give us some actual numbers?
Yeah, sure. So players with 3 or more years of experience, they had a 2.55 times higher rate of all injuries.
Wow, okay.
And then for those more severe injuries, the ones that sideline players for over a week, it was 2.65 times higher.
That's huge.
Yeah. And even concussions, it was 2.69 times higher for that group.
So it really seems like experience might not be the protective factor that we thought it was.
Yeah, it's definitely a head-scratcher.
But couldn't it be that those more experienced players were just playing more aggressively overall? Regardless of body checking.
That's a good question. And the researchers actually looked into that. They considered other things that could lead to injuries, like what level the players were competing at. Were they in elite leagues or more recreational leagues? They also factored in the player's weight, any past injuries, and even what positions they played on the ice. But even after accounting for all that stuff, the body checking experience itself was still a major factor in those injury rates.
So it wasn't just that they were bigger or playing in more intense leagues. It really seems like the body checking itself was linked to those higher injury rates.
That's exactly what the data suggests.
Okay, but if it's not just about experience, why would those players with more body checking under their belts be more likely to get hurt?
Well, one idea is that as players get older, the game itself changes. Everything gets faster, stronger, more intense. The hits just get more forceful. A check from a 15-year-old is a lot different from a check from a 12-year-old, you know?
Yeah, totally.
It's like getting bumped in a bumper car versus getting tackled by a linebacker.
Yeah.
The forces involved are just completely different.
Makes sense. But is it just that those hits are more intense? Or could it be that maybe the players who've been body checking longer, maybe they develop some bad habits or start making riskier decisions because they're, more confident in their abilities?
Yeah, it's possible.
Like maybe they're going for those big hits when a less experienced player might kind of hold back a bit.
That's a really interesting thought. Like, maybe it's not just about knowing how to body check, but also knowing when to body check. And maybe those experienced players, they develop a bit of a bias towards physicality,
Yeah, like a go for the hit mentality.
Exactly. And that might lead them to make some riskier decisions, especially as the game gets faster and more complex in those older age groups.
That's fascinating. So maybe it's not just about technique, it's also about decision making.
Right. And that brings us to this big question. What do these findings actually mean for this whole debate about body checking in youth hockey?
Yeah.
Like, does this study finally settle it?
Yeah, big questions to unpack there. And we'll dive into all that right after this break.
So before the break, we were talking about those surprising findings about body checking and injuries in youth hockey. I mean, the idea that more experience could actually lead to more injuries is pretty wild.
Definitely goes against what a lot of people think. And it brings up some big questions about what we can do to keep young players safe, right? I mean, if experience isn't the answer, then what is?
Well, the researchers who did the study, they actually talk about some other things that could be going on.
Yeah.
For example, they said there could be like some underlying medical conditions, things that weren't measured in the study, but could make a player more prone to getting injured.
Interesting. Like what kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, they specifically mentioned ADHD and learning disorders.
Oh, wow. Okay. I wouldn't have thought of that right away. But why would those things matter?
Yeah, it's definitely an area for more research, But it's possible those players might have like slower reaction times, or maybe they struggle a bit more with spatial awareness on the ice, where they are in relation to everyone else. And that could put them at a higher risk of collisions or falls, even if body checking isn't involved.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of remember, too, that they talked about, like, different playing styles, something about, like, aggressiveness being a factor.
Exactly. They said, some players are just naturally more aggressive on the ice. They're more likely to, take risks, initiate contact, maybe go for those big hits. And those players might just get injured more often, no matter how much body checking experience they have.
So it's not just about how long you've been body checking, but, like, your overall approach to the game.
Right.
Right.
Like, you could have someone who's been body checking forever, but they're super cautious.
Yeah.
Really defensive player. And then you have a rookie who's like throwing his weight around all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. So it's more about individual style than just experience.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And,
Yeah.
It makes you think, even if you took body checking out of youth hockey completely, those individual styles and those behavioral factors, they could still be playing a role in those injuries.
Right. So we've got all these things mixed together, experience, playing style, maybe even some underlying medical stuff, all feeding into a player's risk of getting hurt. It's complicated. So, like, what can we actually do with this information?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
If it's not as simple as just changing the rules, are we kind of stuck just accepting that hockey is a risky sport? Like, injuries are just part of the game?
I don't think so. I think this study really shows that we need like a multifaceted approach to player safety. Like, rules are important, but they're just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
We also need to be thinking about coaching, how we teach young players to like approach the game. Are we emphasizing safety, smart decision making, or are we kind of accidentally encouraging this win at all costs thing that might lead to players taking unnecessary risks?
Right. Maybe we need to change the whole culture of youth hockey a little bit, like get away from that whole toughness at all costs kind of thing.
Yeah.
Instead of like celebrating the huge hits, maybe we should be focusing on those players who are making those smart, safe decisions out there.
I think that's a huge part of it. We need to make it clear that it's okay to choose safety over scoring the goal or making that big play.
Right.
Like, it's okay to back off from a risky situation. It's okay to speak up if you're feeling hurt or if you're feeling pressure to play when you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like, that's true strength, not playing through an injury.
I like that. And that message needs to come from like everybody, right? Coaches,
Yeah.
Parents, the players themselves. It's got to be a group effort.
Exactly. And it's a process. This research is still ongoing, so who knows? Maybe if we do another deep dive on this topic in a few years, we'll have even more answers and even more ways to make the game safer.
I hope so. That'd be great. But for now, I think we've talked a lot about the physical side of things, like the rules, the hits, the injuries. What about the mental and emotional side of player safety? We touched on this earlier, but maybe we should dig a little deeper.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we tend to focus on the physical stuff, but the mental and emotional impacts of injuries, they can be huge, especially for young athletes.
Right. There's so much pressure on those kids to be tough, to, play through pain, never show any weakness. Could all that pressure actually be part of the problem?
Definitely something to think about. I mean, maybe some players are pushing themselves too hard, taking risks because they feel like they have to prove something. Or maybe they're not being honest about injuries because they don't want to look weak or let their team down.
Yeah, and that can be dangerous, right? If a player isn't telling the truth about how they're feeling, they could make things worse, or even end up with a much more serious injury down the line. So maybe, along with changing the rules and the coaching, we also need to change the way we talk about mental toughness in hockey.
I think so. We need to help young players understand that. Like, real strength. It isn't about ignoring pain or playing hurt. It's about knowing your limits, listening to your body, and making those smart choices that will let you keep playing the game you love for years to come.
Yeah, I love that. It's about shifting that whole definition of toughness away from just the physical stuff and looking at the whole picture, being a strong athlete mentally and physically.
Exactly. It's about giving players the power to take care of themselves, both their body and their mind.
So as we head into the last part of this deep dive, I want everyone listening to keep this idea of mental toughness in mind. We've looked at the research, the rules, the physical side of things, but the psychological side is just as important. How can we create a culture in youth hockey that supports, like the whole player, their physical well-being and their mental well-being? That's what we'll be getting into next. All right, so we're back. And just a quick recap, we've been talking about body checking in youth hockey, and we've seen some pretty surprising research that suggests more experience with body checking might actually lead to more injuries.
Yeah, we've really been digging into that. And we've talked about how things like playing styles and even maybe some underlying medical conditions could play a role too. It's complicated.
It is. And as we wrap up our deep dive here, I want to bring it back to our listener. We've talked about the idea of maybe getting rid of body checking in youth hockey altogether. But even if that happened, it seems like the rules themselves aren't enough. We need to do more.
Exactly. Even without body checking, there's still a risk of injuries.
Yeah.
So we need to look deeper at those other factors, the culture of the game, the mindset of the players, that kind of thing.
Right. So some tough questions for everyone involved, right? Players, parents, coaches, even the fans. Are we sending the right message to these young players about what it means to be tough, to be successful in hockey?
Yeah. I mean, are we teaching them the skills they need to make smart, safe decisions out on the ice? And are we creating an environment where they feel like they can actually speak up about injuries? Without feeling ashamed or worried about letting their team down.
It's so important. And, this isn't just about preventing injuries. It's about fostering a love for the game. If we create this culture where players feel pressured to win at all costs, to play through pain, what are we really teaching them?
Yeah, we could end up pushing them away from the sport entirely.
Exactly. We want them to enjoy it, to have fun, and to play for a long time.
Absolutely. We want them to develop a healthy relationship with hockey, one that's built on skill and sportsmanship, and a genuine passion for the game.
I love that. So to everyone listening, I want to leave you with this. Think about how you can contribute to a positive and supportive environment in youth hockey. Whether you're a player, a parent, a coach, or just a fan. How can you promote both physical and mental well-being? How can you help young athletes understand that true strength comes from making those smart, safe choices, and taking care of themselves for the long run?
It's a conversation we all need to be having. And by working together, we can create a future for youth hockey where players can really thrive. On and off the ice.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Hopefully you found it informative and maybe even a little inspiring. And until next time, keep those questions coming and keep pushing for a better, safer future for the game we all love.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.